photographers. Which should you choose first? The lens or the camera? This is the second generation version of Sony's 24-70 f2.8 G-Master lens. It arrived just in time for the Canada Day fireworks, which felt appropriate. Is this the best lens of all time? Is it better than the first generation 24-70? Well, the new lens is on loan from Sony. I don't get to keep it. They didn't review the script or the video before posting, and the Gen 1 is a rental from VizTech. They also want it back. Now, always best to start with photos. Then we'll get to the physical details, the operational aspects, and some pixel peeping. This video is in 4K, so that you can appreciate the quality in these 33 megapixel images taken with the Sony a7 IV. Lots of crisp, sharp detail, even as we go into 100%. One of the design goals here was to make a lens that could fully deliver for the new cohort of high-resolution sensors. Design considerations and details that didn't matter much with 12, 16, or 24 megapixels start to appear at higher resolutions, so 6 years after releasing the 24-70 G-Master, Sony has improved it. This is a full-frame E-mount lens, although clearly it works fine on APS-C cameras, where the equivalent is 36 to 105 millimeters. The deep reds and purples in these straight-out-of-camera JPEGs using the a7 IV's VV2 creative look are, as promised, bright, rich, and vivid colors. To my eyes, other manufacturers' deeply saturated colors lose detail and texture. Not Sony. And that adds more reason to save images with the increased dynamic range and 10-bit color space offered by the new high-efficiency image format over JPEG's 8-bit. The remainder of this video is recorded using the new 24-70 lens. The 24-70's full-frame field of view is 84 to 34 degrees, and that's a range most of us consider as suitable for general-purpose photography. It's also called a walkabout lens. That's usually the first lens you buy. The closest focus distance ramps from 21 centimeters wide to 30 fully zoomed. At an f2.8 aperture, the background defocus is smooth and natural. And this is not a bargain lens. The price in Canada has increased about 10% over the first generation. This lens ranks among Sony's best, and the price reflects that. That's not just Sony marketing. While it's too soon for the Gen 2 version, the original version got high marks, awards, and praise across the board. Of course, it's not just resolution. Focus speed, although it may be driven by the camera, also requires the lens to be responsive. With the a7 IV, focus speed moving from infinity to the closest focus point, both at the center and the edges, is exceptionally fast. Sony's media release says the new focus system reduces focus breathing, focus shift, and axial shift. Focus improvements come partly thanks to Sony's new motor system. This scene is taken from their promotional video. Looks impressive. Focus breathing is visible when the field of view changes as the focus is adjusted. Here's the lens on its own as I turn the focus from far to near. However, the a7 IV also has a focus breathing setting for video. That's better. Focus shift occurs when an aperture change results in a change in focus. Now, it happens in the instant between the shutter soft press to focus and the shutter release as the iris steps down to the selected aperture. I think I've always taken the blame when that happens. Not sure how to put that one to the test. I tried taking close-up images at a variety of apertures. They're all sharp. Tried it with the first gen. They're also good. Maybe I need to find a lens that doesn't do this. Then, I'm not sure what axial shift refers to. Sony's otherwise useful lens terminology page doesn't explain, nor does Wikipedia. Perhaps use the comments if you can shed some light. Focus improvements are visible when objects move through the focus field. Tracking expands spot locks on, stays with the train even as it turns the bend, and then switches to face and eye autofocus as it approaches the closest focus distance. So the rehearsal's great, But when you start shooting, performance deteriorates, missing several frames, and that was the best of a bunch of attempts. In video, touch tracking, and I'm recording 120 frames here, is very reliable. The only drawback on the A7 IV is that touch doesn't work when an external monitor recorder is connected. Here's a frame-by-frame extract from a 120 frame video recording. Incidentally, the focus motor is very quiet. It's barely noticeable, even when you're listening for it. Well, let's do the mechanical basics. The design matches the Sony 7 series bodies, and the weight balance is excellent. The center of gravity must be closer to the camera than usual. However, the size is slightly large on the A7 IV. My fingers chafe the barrel, but unlike many lenses on this camera, it doesn't extend below the body. The hood does, though. Side by side with Gen 1, it's slightly shorter by 1.6 centimeters and lighter by 190 grams. Sony claims that this is the smallest and lightest standard zoom lens. In my hands, it's a noticeable difference, and that will translate into better performance and compatibility when using a gimbal, as well as some relief on a long day of handheld shooting. 82mm filter diameter is the same. Minimum focus distance is 21 centimeters wide to 30 centimeters fully zoomed. Gen 1 was 38. Maybe it's not quite enough for macro. Sony found 2 more aperture blades for the Gen 2, now 11. The specification says dust and moisture resistant. The fine print says not 100%. The lens has more physical controls than most. That's one of the largest noticeable differences between Gen 1 and 2. There's an unmarked focus ring. All focus action is internal, and it is focused by wire. However, Gen 2 has what Sony's marketing calls linear response manual focus. Let me show you how that works at F2.8. Maarte, a Playmobil version of a Rembrandt portrait, is at the lens's closest focus distance, about 30 centimeters, fully zoomed at 70 millimeters. His partner Opia is 20 centimeters back. It's about 1/4 turn of the focus ring, and I've marked the lens with masking tape at the focus settings for Maarte and Opia. A true mechanical linear lens would have focus distance markings. Those markings enable an accurate and repeatable rack focus from one to the other, whether the transition is fast or slow. A nonlinear lens can't do that. And it's even simpler if you have a follow focus attachment. Like Gen 1, a switch on the barrel selects auto or manual focus operation. If the camera is set for manual focus, it overrides this switch, and when the lens is set for manual focus, it overrides the camera's setting. I'm avoiding confusion by keeping the lens at the AF setting. There's a marked ring for zoom, 1/4 turn. The lens extends about 3 centimeters. And a switch, smooth or tight. Smooth has the typical friction resistance, and on a tripod, I found that it worked very nicely for an organic zoom on Spencer McKenzie. Now also, the term parfocal doesn't appear in the promotional material for this lens. However, focus doesn't change as I zoom, so that means it's at least parfocal-ish. The tight provides more friction. The manual suggests the tight setting would be effective to stop the lens from creeping in or out when the camera is pointed up or down. That didn't seem necessary to me. Because the lens is fairly light, it doesn't creep with either the smooth or the tight setting. Gen 1 didn't have the smooth tight control, but did have a lock. Gen 1 had only 2 rings. The Gen 2's 3rd ring is a manual detinted aperture f2.8 to f22, A for auto position. There's a little extra push required from f22 to auto. There's an iris lock switch. It stops the ring from switching into or out of auto mode. It doesn't lock a manual aperture setting. And a second switch, click on off, removes the detents, providing smooth aperture adjustment for video. Both of those are not as easy to access as they're on the part of the barrel that slopes back to the flange. The manual aperture settings work only when the camera is in manual or aperture priority exposure. I'm not sure what's happening when the lens is in auto in those modes. And as Steve Jobs liked to say, one more thing. Gen 1 had one, but Gen 2 has two round keys on the barrel between the focus and zoom rings. By default, it's focus hold. Then, in the camera's custom key settings, a function can be assigned to these keys. One setting applies to both. Now, I like eye autofocus, but literally, the entire function set, all 33 pages, can be assigned. And even without using the key, the A7 IV's eye autofocus identifies eyes, but the key provides quick action and confidence. Let's take a closer look at the detail in the corners. Now, this is 100%. Detail remains sharp. These guide wires could be a challenge, but again, even at 100%, the lines are crisp with no color fringing or chromatic aberration. At 200% magnification, all I get is more detail. No problems. For all the peeping I did into the corners of images, at 200 and even 300%, I couldn't find any issues to complain about. This lens doesn't have optical stabilization, but as most Sony cameras do, you may not miss it. This is handheld video with active stabilization on. So, with the parfocalish smooth zoom, the unstepped aperture, it's a very pleasing lens for video. Gen 2 has a slightly shallower hood with a sliding door to adjust variable ND or polarizing filters. A case with strap is included. Now, I don't have either the tools or the expertise to do what DxOMark will do. I'll await their detailed technical report. And as I said at the beginning, the lens is on loan, which is a pity. I hate to send it back, but Terry at DV Shop, my local dealer, has ordered one for me, and that's how much I liked it. If you're considering a new Gen 1 to save a few dollars, I think you're giving up a lot, particularly on the functionality side. In fact, if you already own a Gen 1, I'd seriously consider this as an upgrade. It is a superior lens, high quality, great features and controls. It should make you consider Sony, especially if you can also afford to get the equally desirable companion 16-35 and 70-200 G-Masters. My only complaint with this trio is that they have different filter diameters. So, is the 24-70 upgrade the best lens of all time? Well, I'll wait for the techs at DxOMark and leave that to you to decide. So, I don't read ads, nor do I let YouTube interrupt my videos with ads. That's thanks to those of you who support this channel as members. We're all grateful. Use the join button below to get in on the fun. I do read and reply to all civil comments and relevant questions, so let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.